Moving on to item F7, hearing on the request for a waiver of requirements regarding the glove weights by contestants Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Conor McGregor for their scheduled bout August 26, 2017. If it pleases the commission, since we did receive this request jointly from both fighters, I would like to have representation from both fighters come forward and explain to us why they are seeking this waiver of our regulations. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Can I get your gentleman's name for the record, please?
Mr. Chairman, Michael Mersch on behalf of Conor McGregor.
How are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
And John Warner, we're on behalf of Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Okay. Do you guys want to flip a coin for who's going to go first?
I've drawn a lot.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you, first of all, for entertaining our proposal. We know it's as unique as the fight itself and something that we take very seriously. We have two terrific fighters, one the best boxer of his generation, the other the best MMA fighter of his generation, who are looking to have the best contest they can on August 26th. In that regard, they have approached us, each fighter, and has asked that we come before the commission and ask that this change be considered in the glove weight. They feel that it is something that will help them give the best show, give the best display of their talents, and something that they believe is in the best interest of everyone involved in this event. That being said, I rely on the papers that we submitted, and we'll see if you have any questions as we move forward. Mr. Mayweather obviously has been advised by us in terms of what the regulation is, what it requires to be changed, what the risks are, the rewards, etc. Mr. Mayweather is on board with that and asks that
Mr. Horner, can you elaborate a little more than just submitting this two-paragraph letter? You're asking us to consider revising a rule that has been long-standing.
it is a long-standing rule, sir, and honestly, it's a special event. It's something that these two boxers, one Mayweather, who's fought 46 of his 49 bouts at 147 pounds. Mr. McGregor is fighting his first bout in boxing. But Mr. Mayweather is very accustomed to using 8-ounce gloves in a bout. He has used 10-ounce gloves 3 times in his 154-pound bouts. He understands the difference. He believes that the 8-ounce gloves are the best ones for him, not only to contest the bout, but boxing being a sport of self-defense, to defend himself. That his tactics and what he wants to do in the ring would be best served using the 8-ounce gloves themselves, and asks that that be considered. We note that the regulations themselves speak to a cutoff of 147 pounds as the weight at which both boxers can agree and not present a case in front of the commission for this kind of an exception. We missed that by 1 weight class. We have to live with that. That's where the line was drawn. However, I think if we look at this in terms of safety and what goes on, there's a weight that boxers weigh in, and there's a weight that boxers fight at. And when you look at welterweights, 147-pound fighters who weigh in, they're stepping in the ring with those 8-ounce gloves on, weighing anywhere between 150 and 170 pounds, the same as Mr. Mayweather and Mr. McGregor will do on the 26th.
What do you expect him to weigh in at?
Mr. Mayweather, his usual 150 pounds, and he'll be 150 pounds on the night. That's his best weight. There's no reason to put on extra weight.
Are you familiar with the evolution of the rule that we have?
I am not totally familiar with the evolution of it itself. I was a little surprised to see that it went down to 135 pounds, that being requiring the 10-ounce gloves. I've obviously worked with Mr. Bennett in the past on these types of issues, in addition to the glove safety issues which came up after the Maidana fight. So obviously we realize that the health and safety of the boxers is paramount here, and what the commission is looking to preserve, but also to ensure that the contestants are comfortable in performing their tasks on the night and can do their best and perform their best.
So you are aware of the primary concern of the commission as the health and safety of both of our contestants, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely, sir, and that's why I brought the example of welterweight fights all over the world are contested. People weigh in at 147 pounds I recently did a fight in England with Earl Spence and hit his opponent, and they did the IBF second day weigh-in. They weighed in at 147 pounds. The next morning at 9 a.m., they were 156.8 each. They walked into the ring at 170 pounds. They contested those bouts with 8-ounce gloves, and pretty much every welterweight bout in the world is contested with those 8-ounce gloves at that weight, and they're done safely. And we believe that'll be done here as well.
I'll reserve.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Horno? Mr. Mersch?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, first of all, thank you. Just to give you some background, on behalf of Mr. McGregor, first of all, to give some background, Mr. McGregor has been training nonstop for this fight basically since last February. And at that entire time, he's been prepared to proceed forward wearing 10-ounce gloves. That being said, the entirety of his professional MMA career, he's used to wearing 4-ounce gloves. So on behalf of Mr. McGregor, we have absolutely no objection to that. We don't believe there's any significant detriment to health and safety, which of course I understand is the most important thing. I agree with Commissioner Avancino. That's always our primary concern as well. We, again, based on the fact that we do have two of the premier athletes, premier combat sports professionals in the world asking for this, I think in their professional determination, they believe that it's safe for them to do that. And so we are certainly supportive of that. Just to give a little more color, this started as a somewhat of a challenge by Mr. Mayweather over social media that perhaps the match would be better contested with 8-ounce gloves. Again, we had been preparing the entire time in 10-ounce gloves, but had immediately, after receiving that, accepted and have no concerns whatsoever about contesting this match with 8-ounce gloves. So happy to answer any other questions, but on behalf of Team McGregor, we believe it's fine. We don't have any health and safety concerns on behalf of our fighter, and certainly happy to answer any other questions about the training regimens of Mr. McGregor relative to it, but certainly are supportive of the request.
Any questions from any commissioners? Mr. Mersch?
No, sir. What weight do you anticipate that Mr. McGregor will weigh in on fight day?
I anticipate that, well, certainly Mr. McGregor, I'm sure, will weigh in without a problem on weigh-in day. Mr. McGregor, as we sit here right now, throughout the majority of his training camp has been about 160 pounds. So I think that's why I'm very confident he won't have any trouble making weight, and I anticipate he'll be right about that, maybe slightly higher than that on the actual fight day.
Thank you.
Okay. Please.
Good morning, Mr. Mersch and Mr. Hornior. I just want to confirm, both in the backup material, but I would like just to confirm on the record that both camps confirm that any risks that are associated with the request, the reduction of the weight size, are being assumed by both camps.
On behalf of Mr. Mayweather, that is correct.
The same for Mr. McGregor. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for these two gentlemen? None? Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room that have an opinion on it, but is there anybody that has a qualified opinion that represents the camps that I'm unaware of that would like to speak? Okay, great. At this point, I think I'll close the testimony from the audience and move to the commissioners, and would like to get your perspective on this. Let's have a good dialogue about this. Who would like to start? Go ahead, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Chairman Marnell. It's a fun time and it's a neat topic for the entertainment of Nevada to address a topic that's a concern of ours for anything that we do, because we want great entertainment, but we want health and safety of the fighter first and foremost. I wrote a few notes and I just kind of wanted to cover it because it's really just a conversation among the commissioners where my heart's at dealing with this. Smaller gloves in this particular fight.
Commissioner, can I ask you to speak into the mic, please?
Smaller gloves in this particular fight, in general, will favor the harder hitting, heavier fighter. In this particular fight, I think it's not going to be as significant of an issue as maybe compared to some other fights or some other fighters that will be fighting along this realm. What is a concern for me, we're talking 2 ounces, and this is for people that are in the fight realm, is that what's the brand of the gloves? Because if we do decide to go ahead and drop to 2 ounces, there's a significant difference between brand of gloves that are out there and actually lot numbers. So you can get an 8-ounce glove that'll weigh 8 ounces, but where's that padding put? We're going by the weight, and how's it going to effectuate the fighting individuals when they're there? So I would recommend if we do go down to 8, that it's the same brand of gloves and close to the same lot numbers. And I feel real comfortable with we have excellent inspectors that they'll be able to oversee that and mandate that it's the same brand gloves and it's the same weight and the same caliber coming in, because even sometimes with 4-man gloves, you get one lot and it's a different glove than the other lot, and you're looking at it, it's like, no, this wasn't even though they weigh 8 ounces, they weigh 10 ounces, they're still a different glove as you're coming into them. So that would be a concern, and I'd like the commission to address that if we do decide to drop to a lower amount. As I said before, I think for this particular style fight and styles to make fights, I don't think this is going to be a significant issue on my behalf. I've had about over 20 years of boxing. I'm board certified in ringside medicine, and I've been with our Olympic team a long time, and so I feel comfortable making this statement. But as a physician, and who's dealt with some serious complications and have had deaths in the past, we always worry about that, and we want to do the best we can for the fighters. But I think these individuals are coming forward, and they're intelligent individuals with what they want to do, and I'm in favor of granting what they would like to move forward with. This has been said before, I think, by the individual before us. This is like a unique time. This is a hybrid fight. It's not a hybrid fight where you're combining MMA and boxing, but it's a hybrid fight where you've had an individual that has never stepped ring in a boxing ring against arguably one of the world's best offensive boxers out there. So it's a unique time. It's going to be a very interesting and entertaining event that's going to take place. Concerning the health and safety of the fighter, the rate limiting factor is the referee. It's not the promoter, it's not the family, it's that referee. And we have A+ referees in Nevada. So I always feel comfortable when our referees are involved that they have the best interest of the fighter involved. So that's the key point that I'd like to address to my fellow commissions. It's actually the referee, because I've seen many tribes of people in many camps that you think would have the best interest of the fighter, and it's the rate limiting step that the referee can step in, say this just is too much of a beating, we have a hurt, and we have a tired fighter, we got to call this fight because they're warriors and they're going to fight to the maximum that they can to take over. We all know recently that an individual passed away a couple months ago that was an MMA fighter going into the boxing, and again, the rate limiting step, or as our great Nevada refs, that will put a stop before they feel that it gets to such a level. So I'd like to beseech my fellow commissioners. I thank Chairman Anthony Marnell for allowing me to speak. We've talked briefly about this episode. He asked me just to present my thoughts here today. And so for the health and the safety of the fighter, we have 2 individuals that are we have 2 people that want to do it. And I think the style of this fight as an entertainment would be warranted, and I think the health and safety of the fighters will be protected by our excellent refs. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. I hate to put you on the spot, Commissioner Avancino, but I think that your perspective on this and history of this would be very helpful, if you wouldn't mind. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me an opportunity to simply suggest that it is always important, I believe, for this commission to maintain the integrity of our rules as best we can. I think our former director, Mark Ratner, former Attorney General, Mike Mersch, and of course Bob Bennett would agree with that assertion. as the chairman would understand, I would always be reluctant to make an adjustment to a long-standing rule, which, as Mr. Ratner will recall, has been in place since 2006. And it's in place as a result of an advisory committee on health and safety, which was chaired by our highly esteemed former chairman, Sig Rogich, and co-chaired by Dr. Jim Nave. It took them 9 months to give us this advice. And that advice was simply, if you're under 147 pounds, you wear an 8-ounce glove in boxing. And if you are above 147 pounds, you wear a 10-ounce glove. That's the rule for now at least 11 years. However, rules need to be reconsidered from time to time, as I think we all agree. This is a merger of two disciplines, unprecedented in my career on this commission, that of boxing and mixed martial arts. In one camp, we have Floyd Mayweather, who at least, help me here, Mr. Ellerby, but at least his 6 fights, previous fights, have been fought with an 8-ounce glove.
Yes, sir.
He has worn a 10-ounce glove, but that's been a while back, if I recall. On the other hand, we have, as a result of this mixed discipline now, this kind of crossover combination, a mixed martial artist of great ability who has fought only with a 4-ounce glove, but is willing to make a 100% increase in weight to fight with an 8-ounce glove as well. So it's an unusual contest for us as a commission. And I was reviewing, Mr. Chairman, the actual recommendations of our advisory committee back from 2006. And they said this: given the fact that the committee did not have any scientific proof as to the advantage of one glove size over another, the committee recommends that the commission look at conducting a scientific study on glove size and whether the size of the gloves used makes a difference. Well, as Mr. Ratner knows, I wasn't chairman in 2007 or in 2008, and not again until 2011. So I don't think, Mr. Ratner, that we ever did that scientific study.
That is correct.
So I had something to suggest to the commission, at least for an opportunity of further consideration, is let's not change our long-standing rule. That's the beauty of the law. Precedential value of what we have and what we can rely on. But because this is a merger of these two disciplines, perhaps we could consider a one-fight exception to allow 8 ounces with the understanding that we will conduct this study that we just haven't done yet to determine 11 years later whether this is a rule that's worthy for us. I mean, I'm sure the chairman knows well that we have 4-ounce gloves at every weight class, isn't it, Chair? In mixed martial arts. So this is something that I would go along with. Normally I would say, no, let's not change the rule unless there's a really good reason. I wasn't given really too great a reasons why we should change it, frankly. All due respect, sir. So I think we're going to help with that and suggest that maybe we've done this with other instances, as Mr. Bennett knows, where we can give a one-fight license or one-fight exception, but only on the basis that we would commit to proceeding with some form of study, someone that you would appoint to have that reviewed and get back to the commission, but keep our rule intact until we actually do that. That's all, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Avancino. That's helpful. I dare ask what box you had to go to and what warehouse or garage to put
It's here. I have it. Wasn't easy to find it.
Are there any other comments or questions from other commissioners? Anything they'd like to offer before I put my final thoughts into this? Commissioner Alonso, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I think that both Commissioner Carpenter and Commissioner Avancino provided really valuable information during this deliberation to help all of us get to a decision where we can make a knowledgeable motion or vote. I think that I have, I'm not really sure, I would say struggled, but I have been challenged with this request initially because, like Commissioner Avancino stated, the integrity of the rules and the guidelines that have been set forth before us are my guideline and roadmap for the future in this position and role. I do feel that I spent my night watching previous Mayweather fights over again, even though I've watched them all previously as a boxing enthusiast, and counted the number of times of 8-ounce gloves versus 10. And I certainly respect that Mr. McGregor normally fights with 4-ounce gloves and is going 100% at 8-ounce, and was prepared when accepting this bout that he would follow the guidelines of boxing and the rules that were created before them. Commissioner Carpenter made an excellent point in that the referee really plays the key role. And I commend Executive Director Bennett for his selection of the referee, because I think Mr. Bird is an excellent delivery of the understanding of the rules of boxing, and will act accordingly for the public safety of both fighters. And with the reassurance of a 2006 document that I get to, that is right next to me and allows me to review, I feel that I'm more comfortable knowing that there's no scientific proof to the advantage of one glove size or another. And I believe that Commissioner Avancino's recommendation for a one-time consideration with a follow-up that we take the advice that was given to us years ago and request a further study has valid points.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Moore, please.
Just a few comments, since I clearly do not have the years of experience that the other commissioners have on my 2 days on this commission. But I want to echo Commissioner Alonso's comments of gratitude to both Dr. Carpenter and Commissioner Avancino to give us some historical background as to how the regulations in the NAC with regard to glove weight came about. I think just based on my review of the background documents for the agenda, there's no other way to define this fight other than unconventional. And seeing, two premier athletes go to fight in this regard is definitely not normal, and I think that the fight itself is not normal. But hearing that two world class athletes have agreed to go to this weight class, or not only the weight class, but the actual weight of the glove, and the lack of scientific evidence, as Commissioner Alonso mentioned, gives me a little bit more comfort to entertain the waiver request from both camps. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, I have not reviewed the bout agreement specifically. I would like to confirm with both camps that this, as usually customary in these fights, that we are dealing with the foam gloves here. We're not dealing with horsehair or MX gloves. Is that correct?
Yes, my name is Hunter Campbell. I'm the Executive Vice President and General Counsel for UFC. Just to address your point, Mr. Carpenter, the way that this fight was constructed, along with Mr. Elby and the Mayweather team and the Zuffa team myself, MX-style gloves, which are the traditional Mexican horsehair gloves, are prohibited in this fight. Both fighters are required to inspect the other fighter's gloves prior to the event taking place, and both fighters have agreed to wear more traditional, what we'll call American-style gloves, where the padding is more significant than the typical Mexican puncher-style glove. So I know that was a point to you. I just wanted to address that.
Are you stating it will be the same brand? Or?
I'm not certain that it will be the same brand, only to the extent that each fighter, I think, has separate endorsement deals with separate brands. One of the things, though, that I think that Mr. Ellaby and I can agree on is that we will certainly make sure that the gloves themselves are very similar and comparable. Neither of us have any interest in putting either of our fighters at danger or at risk.
Leonard, are you in agreement with that?
I'm in agreement.
Okay.
Okay, one other question I have, where are the gloves now?
So I
Are the
think
gloves, and I'm sure they're being made, but are they in country yet? Are they usually, or like the usual last minute, or where are the sets?
We've been waiting on this determination. We put that on hold to determine whether they're going to be 8 or 10 ounce gloves. Now that we have
So in
this-
10 minutes, somebody's going to be making some gloves really fast. Or both sets are already made.
At least a new color, yes.
Well, at least we're not doing this tonight
That was a
before.
good answer.
At least we're a couple days in. Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Campbell, I appreciate it.
my pleasure, thank you.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to make them brief and I'll be succinct with them. As I've gotten originally appointed to this commission and have been here, I have a total respect for the history of this commission. And Commissioner Avancino, you have been so valuable to me over my 3-year tenure here on why things were done, when they were done, and the times in which they were done in. And one thing that you always encouraged me to do as I got here was that it was okay to challenge that. And I think as evidence of your encouragement, along with prior Chairman Aguilar, we challenged many of the things that were here, but we respected the history of what had been put in place by this commission, and we were only challenging it in the vein of making it better or trying to adopt it to the current times. And it seems as in my tenure at this commission, we always are presented with a new opportunity and a new challenge of something that's unique. I think hence the proof in that, from being a general funded agency to a self-funded agency and rewriting regulations that were 17 years old and modernizing them with all the MMA content that was required and bringing the public into the process. So that's, I want to just put that on the record with my fellow commissioners, that I think it's important that we're always looking at these regs and these rules from a historical perspective and understanding the history, but asking ourselves, do they make sense for today? So, secondly, we all know that gloves, if you've been involved in and around boxing in the commission for a while, we all know that gloves and the weight of gloves can be distributed in all kinds of different places. The weight can be in the front, the weight can be on the top of the hand, and the weight can be in the wrist. So that, to me, my perspective is, while the ounce and the history of the ounces is important to recognize, it's also where is the padding in the glove, and I'll come back to that. I do agree with everything that everybody has said here, that at the end of the day, between the 2 ounces, or in the case of the UFC's evolution, we're now letting all weight classes fight with 4 ounces, that the #1 line of defense in the state of Nevada is the referee. It always has been, and it always will be, and I think that we have the best in the world on that, and we pride ourselves in stopping fights 1 punch early versus 1 punch too late. And we are, no matter what we decide here today, that is still going to be the first line of defense in the health and safety of the fighter. My biggest concern about this consideration or this request that's being made is that I do not like the Nevada State Athletic Commission being used as a pawn in a social media battle. Frankly, between these two, that part of this request, it pisses me off. I'll be really, really honest with you. And I respect the fact that you missed this, and you admitted that in your testimony, that you may have missed this subject when you guys put this bout agreement together. But this body is not the subject of 2 fighters who want to go back and forth like these two have at each other to create social media stir and another controversy for attention to sell tickets and sell direct TV. However, in saying that, I'm willing to put that aside, and I would just caution going forward that this body and this forum not be used for that again. If you cut an agreement, make sure you get it right. When you cut an agreement for this much money, I would expect you get it right, and it works that way going forward. The last thing that I would say in this is, if we do approve this, and I would say at this point, I am in favor of the recommendation of Commissioner Avancino for a one-time approval of this. However, I have 2 stipulations to that. Number 1, Executive Director Bennett, myself, and as well as I think Commissioner Carpenter and any other commissioner who would like to be there, that we do as we always do, but this time with a little bit more visibility. And we are ourselves, we have been in the middle of these glove issues before, and that we inspect all of these gloves. And what I am concerned about is not the weight. What I'm concerned about is that the padding in the front is what it should be. The second stipulation I have to this is that all gloves, all samples that are provided, regardless if they're selected for the bout or not, are turned over to the property of the Nevada Athletic Commission post-fight. And the reason I want that is because these gloves will be the first part of one of our studies in looking at these gloves. And there may be an issue with that because I have some things that I'm not going to talk about today that would go into the study. And as we've looked at gloves in the past, where our inspectors have cut the gloves up, we weighed certain parts of the glove, we look at the contents of the glove. Would that be amenable to both camps if we were to move forward? Or is this, are the gloves that are in the fight something that we can use but we can get back? And that's the reason why I want the alternates and I want the other samples. I know these are a part of history for your fighters and they want them, so I totally respect that. But I would like the alternate set to be used for testing as well as the other ones that are not selected.
That's fine. Fine with us.
Okay, so
You could use them and give them back and keep the sample.
I won't give them back to you cut up. But the other ones I'm
Maybe
gonna.
cut up.
The other ones we're gonna annihilate.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. And Executive Director Bennett, do you have anything else to add to what you've heard here today?
For the sake of brevity, Chairman, no. Everything I heard today, I think, is very unique, it's very different, and I do think it's in the best interest of the fighters, and the referee unequivocally makes a big difference in this fight, and that is a specific reason why I chose Mr. Robert Byrd. So thank you for my comments, Chairman.
Okay, great. So I agree that we will talk offline about how to get a study going immediately, and we're going to need to consider now all of the factors, including what we're doing in the UFC, and the weight ounce in the UFC for all the weight classes and how that pertains to this study. And I'm assuming that, as always, the UFC will be very helpful in helping us participating in that study for information. Absolutely. Okay, great. Okay, great. That's my final comments. I would look, based on the comments that were provided here today by all of the commissioners, I would look for a motion on item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be happy to make the motion to approve the request for a waiver of our longstanding rule of providing for a 10-ounce glove on any weight class over 147 pounds to a 8-ounce glove, in this case, on a one-time exception only, and subject to three stipulations. One is that the gloves will be inspected personally by our chairman and by our executive director prior to use that evening. And second, that the gloves, both the alternates as well as the originals, will be submitted to the executive director after the fight. And 3, that the commission will, through our chairman and executive director, proceed with the review of conducting a study and review of glove size and whether the size of gloves used makes a difference as to our responsibility of health and safety. Excuse me, that's a windy motion, but that includes most things.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner Avancino. Do I have a second on Commissioner Avancino's motion?
I will second.
Great. I have a motion and I have a second on item number 7. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. Motion passes unanimously.